My new female colleague, 22 years old, mooched lunch off me every single day. Lunch, afternoon coffee, dinner like clockwork. I paid for her meals for an entire year. The whole office saw me as a colossal sucker, mocking me for being a fool with more money than sense. The day she quit, everyone expected me to pop champagne. Instead, she walked straight up to me and handed me a letter. The fluorescent lights hummed with a death rattle, the sound of a fly in its final throes. In the office, the clatter of keyboards and the clicking of mice wove together into a thick, sticky noise that glued you to your cubicle. At 11:55 a.m., right on schedule, I opened the DoorDash app. A young face, radiating an almost impossible innocence, peeked over the partition like a freshly sprouted sunflower. "Cole, can you add me to your order? It's my first week, haven't gotten paid yet." Her name was Chloe Vance. It was her first day. I looked into her crystal-clear eyes, and any thought of refusal dissolved like paper in water. "What do you want?" "I'll have whatever you're having." She smiled, her eyes curving into crescents and revealing two small, sharp canines. It was a disarmingly open expression. I ordered 2 Chipotle bowls with double steak. When the food arrived, she devoured it with more gusto than anyone I'd ever seen, scraping the bowl clean. She didn't even bother to wipe the smear of salsa from the corner of her mouth before letting out a satisfied burp. "Thanks, Cole," she said, wiping her mouth, and that was it. No offer to pay me back, no mention of Venmo. I quietly gathered both empty bowls and tossed them in the trash. Later that afternoon, I went to the break room to get some water and overheard muffled laughter from inside. "See that? Cole Miller's playing St. Cole again. First day, and he's already got a leech attached." It was Derek Foster's voice, slick and oily, dripping with a natural-born arrogance. He was my colleague and my most direct rival for the upcoming promotion. "That new girl's pretty sharp, though." Spotted the soft touch from a mile away. Soft touch. He's a walking ATM. Just you watch, this is the first of 1,000 times. Guys like Cole are born to be doormats for other people. Careful he doesn't get fleeced for everything he's worth. My hand, holding my mug, froze mid-air. Steam clouded my vision. The break room door swung open and Derek walked out with a few others, laughing. When they saw me, the sneer on his face didn't vanish. Instead, he looked at me like I was the punchline to a great joke and clapped me on the shoulder. "Hey, Cole, don't take it so hard. She's young, you know? Just starting out, probably broke. Helping her out is the right thing to do." He said it with such magnanimity, but the contempt in his eyes felt like a needle. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked back to my desk. At 3:30 p.m., the afternoon slump hit. Chloe leaned over again, pointing at a boba tea coupon that had popped up on my phone screen. "Cole, that place looks so good." I sighed internally, opened the app again, and ordered 2 drinks. For a solid week, Chloe became my mealtime shadow. I bought lunch, she ate. I bought coffee, she drank. Sometimes, when I worked late, she'd stay with me. She never touched her computer, though. Her only job seemed to be staring at me with the most hopeful eyes imaginable whenever I mentioned ordering a late-night snack. The nickname the sucker spread through the office like a virus. Eventually, even the cleaning lady started looking at me with a glint of pity. It's not that I didn't care. The whispers, the disdainful glances, they crawled over my skin like 1,000 tiny ants. But every time I saw the look of pure satisfaction on Chloe's face when she ate, I was reminded of my own childhood, living with foster parents. Back then, I dreaded mealtimes. Every grain of rice on their table came with a side of scrutiny and calculation. I was always the one who ate the fastest and the least. On nights I went to bed hungry, it felt like a tiny claw was scratching at the inside of my stomach. Buying Chloe a meal felt like I was feeding that starving kid from my past. Every time she let out one of those happy, satisfied burps, I felt like the boy hiding in the corner, swallowing his own saliva, got a little bit fuller. This secret self-soothing became the only armor I had against the world's ridicule. But the corporate world is a brutal place, and it doesn't give you a pass just for being a nice guy. At the monthly department meeting, I presented a completely new solution for a long-standing, difficult client issue. I had pulled several all-nighters, sifting through mountains of data to build it. When I finished, our director, Mark Harris, just frowned. He didn't approve, he didn't disapprove. He simply turned to Derek. "What do you think? Cole's a bit too by the book. His ideas might not be dynamic enough." The words were a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. In the office, by the book was just a synonym for useless. Derek shot up from his seat like a shark that smelled blood. He took the core logic of my proposal, swapped out my words for a few flashy buzzwords, peppered in some trendy tech jargon, and repackaged the whole thing as his own. "Mark, I think Cole provided an excellent foundation. But we can be bolder. We can segment the user profiles further, integrate the on and offline channels, and create a closed-loop marketing ecosystem. He was eloquent, didn't even need a PowerPoint, just ran his mouth. But Harris ate it up, nodding along, a smile of approval spreading across his face. Yes, Derek, that's a great angle. Ambitious. Let's move forward with your idea. I sat frozen, feeling the blood turn to ice in my veins. That was 2 weeks of my life, and in his mouth, it was just an excellent foundation. A sparse, half-hearted round of applause filled the room, all of it for Derek. I looked at his smug face, the undisguised challenge in his eyes when they met mine. My throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I couldn't say a single word. After work, I walked home alone, my mood at rock bottom. The autumn wind was cold, stinging my face. My phone rang. It was Chloe. Cole, where'd you go? I'm still at the office waiting for you. I already left, I said, my voice cold. No way. How about hot pot tonight? I know this new place that has amazing reviews. I'm dying to try it. Her voice was bursting with a cheerful energy that was completely alien to my current gloom. I really wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her that my work had been stolen, that my boss had just dismissed me, and that all I wanted was to be left alone. But the words that came out were, "Send me the address." I couldn't bring myself to say no to that pure, unadulterated excitement for food. I turned around and walked back to the office building. Chloe was already waiting outside. The moment she saw me, she ran over happily and linked her arm through mine, as if we were old friends. Let's go, let's go. I knew you'd come. We passed a few colleagues who hadn't left yet. They were clustered in small groups, pointing and staring at us. I could hear their words clearly. Look, the leech has got him again. Pathetic. No spine at all. He's happy to be her meal ticket. A simp is gonna simp, I guess. Their contemptuous, amused gazes felt like spotlights, pinning me to the spot. I kept my head down, letting Chloe pull me forward, feeling like a prisoner being paraded through the streets. Numb, humiliated, and mixed with a strange, unspoken sense of resignation. And that's how the year began. Project Nova was our company's most important initiative of the year. It would determine our strategic direction and market share for the next 3 years. Whoever led, it would be set for life. I bet everything on this project. For 2 solid weeks, the office was my home. I spent my days running data analytics and building models. My nights were for writing the proposal and designing charts. The coffee cups on my desk were replaced over and over. The proposal on my screen went through more than a dozen drafts, each version precisely labeled, from V1.0 to V13.5. Chloe became my regular overtime companion. She'd show up every day, not with her brain, but with her appetite. She would sit across from me, unwrapping the Popeyes I ordered for us, and mumble encouragement through a mouthful of fried chicken. Cole, you're a genius. So much data, my head would explode. Cole, this chart is beautiful. Better than anything I could do with Facetune. Cole, you got this. When the project is a success, you have to take me to an all-you-can-eat seafood buffet. When my eyelids were so heavy they felt like they were filled with lead, she would silently hand me an ice-cold Coke. When I was so frustrated I wanted to smash my laptop, she would peel an orange and feed it to me, one segment at a time. She was like a harmless little animal. Besides eating, all she did was offer her own brand of trivial companionship. I have to admit, in those lonely nights of solo battle, her presence made me feel a little less alone. The night before the final presentation, I finally finished the proposal. V14.0 final. Nearly 100 slides. Every data point, every argument was saturated with my blood, sweat, and tears. I let out a long breath, feeling completely drained. Just as I was about to copy the final version to my flash drive, Derek ran over, a look of panic on his face. Cole, man, you gotta help me out. He pointed at his own black screen. My computer just crashed. My presentation for tomorrow is on there. Can I borrow your flash drive for a second? I need to download a backup from the company cloud. His acting was, as always, over the top. He even managed to squeeze out a few beads of sweat on his forehead. A flicker of hesitation crossed my mind. But looking at his panicked face and considering my well-established persona as the nice guy, I couldn't bring myself to say no. Here, I handed him the flash drive from my desk. He took it with 1,000 thanks, plugged it into his laptop, fiddled around for a few minutes, then handed it back. Thanks, man. You're a lifesaver. I'll buy you lunch sometime. I took the flash drive back without a second thought and dragged my exhausted body home. The next day was the company's highest-level strategic presentation. The CEO, CFO, and all the department directors were there. The atmosphere was so tense you could wring water out of it. I sat in the audience, my palms sweating, running through my speech in my head one last time. Then it was Derek's turn. He was wearing a sharp suit, his hair slicked back with a mirror-like shine, and he strode onto the stage with an air of absolute confidence. When a massive screen behind him lit up with the first slide of his PowerPoint, my brain went completely blank with a deafening buzz. The slide template was fancier and more polished than mine. But the title, Project Nova, a new era of digital empowerment, the logo design, the font of the subtitle, they were identical to the one I had finalized at 3 in the morning. As he spoke, my heart sank deeper and deeper into an icy abyss. The core concept, the holistic user lifecycle management, was mine. The data model, the 4-quadrant growth model that I had run hundreds of simulations to optimize, was mine. The market projections, which cited several obscure but visionary industry reports, were all mine. Everything was mine. He had just slapped it all into a prettier template, added a few pointless animations, and turned my life's work into his personal ladder to the top. The CEO and the directors were nodding along, their faces showing unconcealed approval. When Derek finished his last sentence, the conference room erupted in thunderous applause. Director Harris stood up, leading the ovation. "Derek, that was outstanding. This proposal has depth, creativity, and a clear path to execution. I hereby announce that the project lead for Project Nova is Derek Foster." In that instant, I felt all the blood in my body rush to my head. I shot up from my seat. Every eye in the room turned to me. "Director Harris." My voice trembled with rage. The core of that proposal was my work. The applause died instantly. Everyone stared at me, stunned. Derek immediately spun around, his face a perfect mask of hurt and shock. "Cole, how could you say that?" His eyes even started to redden, as if he'd been grievously wronged. Weren't we working late together, discussing it? I was just the one who compiled our shared spark of genius, who did the final polish and presentation. "I know you've been working hard, but you can't take all the credit for yourself." His words were a masterclass in manipulation. In one stroke, he positioned himself on the moral high ground of a team player willing to sacrifice for the greater good, while I was painted as a petty, glory-hogging backstabber. "Yeah, Cole, Derek just said you two discussed it." Seriously, Cole's usually such a nice, quiet guy. Why is he trying to steal the credit at the last minute? Talk about a lack of perspective. If the project succeeds, everyone gets credit. My colleagues started whispering. Their words were like dull knives, carving into my heart. I had no defense. I had no proof. My reputation as the nice guy had just become the deadliest poison. When a person who is used to giving and enduring suddenly lashes out to claim something, it looks to everyone else like an aberration. Director Harris's face hardened. He looked at me sternly. "Cole, watch your tone. This is a company. We value teamwork. I trust Derek's integrity, and I don't believe he would steal a colleague's work. Sit down." The word "sit down" felt like 2 mountains crashing down on my spine. I looked at Harris's unyielding expression, at the fleeting smirk of triumph on Derek's lips, at the mix of pity and contempt in my colleague's eyes. I felt a chill spread through me, like I'd been plunged into an icy cavern. I slowly sat back down, feeling every ounce of strength drained from my body. Just then, a warm hand quietly placed a hot boba tea next to my cold one. I turned my head and saw Chloe looking at me. She didn't say anything. There was no pity in her eyes, no judgment, just a calm, steady gaze. The warmth of the cup seeped through the paper and into my palm. In that moment, it was the only thing that kept me from breaking down completely. In a barren wasteland of despair, a tiny, warm flower had bloomed. Project Nova's first phase was a massive success, and the company decided to throw a celebration gala. The venue was the most luxurious 5-star hotel in the city. Rumor had it the CEO was so pleased he'd approved a 6-figure budget for raffle prizes. The entire department was buzzing. Except for me. I wasn't invited. My name had been quietly erased from the project team list, as if I had never been a part of it. On the day of the gala, everyone left the office early, dressed to the nines and beaming with excitement. I sat alone in the empty office, staring blankly at my computer screen. Displayed on it was my V14. 0 final proposal. It looked like a giant, cruel joke. Chloe ran over to my desk, hugging a stuffed animal. "Cole, they're being such jerks. This was your work. Forget them. Let's go get our own celebration dinner." My treat. It was the first time she had ever offered to pay. I shook my head, my voice hoarse. "I don't have an appetite. You should go have fun." I just wanted to be left alone, like a wounded animal hiding in its cave to lick its wounds. Chloe was about to say something else, but her phone rang. She answered it, said a few words like "be right there," then looked at me, torn. "Cole, well, call me if you need anything." She walked away, looking back every few steps. Soon, it was just me and the slowly darkening sky outside the window. At 9 p.m., my phone started vibrating uncontrollably. It was an unknown number. I swiped to answer, and my ear was assaulted by a cacophony of loud music and raucous laughter. Then came Derek's drunken voice. "Hello? Is this Cole?" He had me on speaker. I could clearly hear his every word echoing through the party. "Cole, buddy, hi, it's me, Derek. I just gotta thank you. You're our department's lucky star. Our hero." A chorus of sycophantic laughter followed. Even though you suck at projects, you're number one at buying meals. Ha ha ha. His voice was dripping with malice and ridicule. "Our little Chloe here, you've been feeding her so well, she's gotten all plump and healthy. So you see, you contributed to the project after all, right? A nice guy like you is fit to treat a princess like Chloe. Consider it your good karma. You should be grateful. You get it? Ha 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 ha." The word princess felt like a white-hot poker stabbing me in the heart. I could hear people in the background jeering. Does he actually think he can win Chloe over by buying her lunch? What a loser, trying to punch way above his weight. A grown man-child hoping to freeload his way out of poverty. Chloe's family is loaded. Why would she ever look at a work spouse like him? The vicious, cutting words, the deafening laughter. They traveled through the phone, straight into my ear, each one a poisoned blade flaying the last scraps of my dignity. The string in my brain labeled reason snapped. I grabbed my jacket, bolted out of the office, ran downstairs, and hailed a cab, barking the name of the hotel. 15 minutes later, I burst through the doors of the private banquet hall like a charging bull. Inside, it was a scene of decadent celebration, music, and clinking glasses. Everyone froze, shocked by my sudden intrusion. Derek was in the center of a fawning crowd, a wine glass in his hand, his face flushed with victory. He saw me, and after a moment of surprise, his expression twisted into an even more contemptuous and provocative smirk. I marched straight towards him, snatched the still active phone from his hand, and with every ounce of strength I had, smashed it on the floor. The screen shattered with a sickening crunch. The room went dead silent. "Who the hell are you calling a fool?" I stared at him, my eyes shot with blood. Fueled by alcohol, Derek shoved me in the chest. "What? Did I hit a nerve? Getting angry now? You are a fool. A complete and utter sucker. You think buying Chloe a few meals would make her fall for you? Take a good look in the mirror, you pathetic loser." I clenched my fists, my knuckles turning white. Just as I was about to swing, Director Harris and a few other male colleagues rushed over and grabbed me. But they weren't breaking up the fight. They were holding me back. Harris had my arm in a death grip, letting Derek stand there and gloat. "Cole, have you lost your mind?" Harris's face was a mask of disgust and impatience. He yelled at me. "The project was a success, everyone's happy, and you barge in here and make a scene? Do you have any sense of team spirit? Don't bother coming in tomorrow. You're suspended. You can come back when you've had time to think about what you've done." His cold words were the executioner's axe, definitively severing my career path. I stared at his blatantly biased face, at Derek's smug, triumphant grin, at the cold, indifferent, and even gloating expressions of everyone around me. My blood felt like it had been flash-frozen. I had lost, utterly and completely. Just as I was about to turn and leave this sickening place like a defeated dog, a figure suddenly rushed forward and stood in front of me. It was Chloe. Her usual smile was gone, replaced by an icy fury I had never seen before. She spread her arms, like a mother hen shielding her chick, and protected me behind her. She looked at everyone in the room and said, each word sharp and clear, "You're all wrong." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable authority. But no one listened to her. In their eyes, she was just a naive new graduate who had been duped by me, the sucker. Harris frowned, annoyed. "Chloe, this doesn't concern you. Step aside." Chloe didn't move. She just glanced back at me. In her eyes, I saw guilt, sympathy, and a flicker of something else I couldn't decipher, a kind of resolve. In that moment, the entire world had betrayed me. Only she stood by my side, even if it changed nothing. The next day, I went back to the office to pack my things. I had become the company's laughingstock. The lunatic who threw a tantrum at a party and got himself suspended because he couldn't handle not getting credit. I walked into the empty office. My once familiar desk now looked cold and alien. Like a ghost, I silently packed my files, books, and coffee mug into a cardboard box. I heard footsteps behind me. Derek and a couple of his cronies were leaning against my cubicle wall, their faces plastered with undisguised schadenfreude. Well, if it isn't Cole. Packing up so early, he drawled the words out. "Don't be so down, man. When one door closes, another one opens." One of his lackeys immediately chimed in. "Yeah, Cole, With your talent for buying meals, you could open a restaurant. It'd be a huge hit. We'd all come support you. Ha ha ha. I ignored them, focusing on packing. I just wanted to get out of this nauseating place as fast as possible. My silence, to them, was proof of my weakness and defeat. Derek's grin widened. He picked up a picture frame I hadn't packed yet, a photo from a company team building event. You gotta be more careful in the future, Cole. Not everyone you meet is a friend. See? You pour your heart and soul into things, and what do you get in the end? Nothing. I lifted my head and stared at him coldly. Put it down. Ooh, you got a problem? Derek tossed the frame back on the desk, where it landed with a harsh clatter. What? You want to start something? Go ahead, try me. I'll have security throw you out of here in a second. Just then, the office door opened. Chloe walked in, carrying a cardboard box identical to mine. The entire office fell silent. She walked straight to Director Harris's office. She didn't even knock, just pushed the door open and went inside. A few seconds later, she emerged holding a signed piece of paper. She walked to the center of the department, faced all the gawking onlookers, and held up the paper. I quit. The room was stunned. Everyone had assumed she was just an ordinary, slightly naive intern. No one could understand why she would throw away a perfectly good job for a loser like me. Disbelief was written all over Derek's face. He instinctively reached out to grab her. Chloe, what are you doing? Don't be impulsive. He's not worth it. Chloe didn't even glance at him. She clutched her box, ignored all the shocked and confused stares, and walked directly to my desk. Derek and his friends parted to let her through, their faces expectant. They probably thought she was coming to draw a line in the sand to kick me while I was down. She stopped in front of me. Then, from her small purse, she pulled out a premium, cream-colored envelope. She tucked the envelope into my hand, which was clutching my box of belongings. Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit the room like a thunderclap, echoing in every corner. My mom's company has a position for you. Vice President. I froze. Everyone froze. The office was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even humming fluorescent lights seemed to have short-circuited. I looked down, my hands trembling as I opened the envelope. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a formal, gold-embossed letter of introduction and a professionally bound employment contract. The letterhead read, Voyager Innovations. Position, Vice President, Strategic Development. Below, there was the handwritten signature of the legal representative, a bold, flowing script that radiated power. The signature read, Catherine Vance. I had only ever seen that name on the cover of Forbes. The founder and CEO of Voyager Innovations, one of the country's top tech firms. A legendary self-made woman who had clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry. The smile on Derek's face cracked like cheap plaster. He looked like he was hallucinating. He lunged forward and snatched the contract from my hands, desperate to see for himself. Chloe's eyes turned to ice. She snatched the contract back from him and brushed it off as if it were contaminated. Can you even read that? Her question was filled with such disdain, it was like an invisible slap across his face. She ignored the petrified crowd, took my wrist, and said, Cole, let's go. I was a puppet on a string, letting her lead me through the dead-silent office. As we passed Derek, I paused for a second. I saw the color drain from his face, his lips trembling, his eyes filled with a cocktail of terror, envy, and utter disbelief. In that moment, an indescribable feeling of vindication shot up from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. We walked out of the building and into the brilliant sunlight. Chloe turned to me, breaking into that familiar, dazzling smile. Cole, this past year, thank you for everything. Now, it's our turn for a celebration dinner. Chloe took me to the most exclusive private restaurant in the city. There was no grand lobby, just a small courtyard with a wooden sign that read, Reservations Only. It was a place I had read about on food blogs, a 4-figure tasting menu, and a 3-month waiting list. After we were seated, Chloe took the menu for the first time. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just started ordering. A chapinot, the truffle risotto, the pan-seared scallops, and this one, the dry-aged porterhouse. She ordered every single dish I had ever mentioned offhandedly that I loved while we were eating cheap takeout together. After the waiter left, we were alone in the private room. She poured me a cup of tea and looked at me with a solemn expression. I'm sorry, Cole. Her voice was soft, thick with apology. This past year, you've been through so much. I held the teacup, watching the steam rise, at a complete loss for words. My brain was still reeling from the shock. I started, my voice hoarse. I don't understand. My mother is Catherine Vance, she began to explain. She built Voyager from the ground up. She's seen the worst of people, been burned by partners and backstabbers too many times. The company is at a critical juncture right now. We need to bring in a new head of strategy, basically a second in command. The position is too important. Mom said she couldn't trust any of the career execs with their polished resumes. She didn't just need a brilliant general. She needed a partner she could trust absolutely. An anchor, someone with talent, but more importantly, someone with humanity and an unbreakable moral compass. I listened silently, my heart pounding against my ribs. So my mom designed this test. Chloe's gaze flickered away. She had me go undercover as a regular college grad at a mid-sized company. No money, no connections. My mission was to get close to a target using the most annoying method possible, and then observe. A target? Yes. She nodded. We used big data and headhunting firms to screen hundreds of candidates across the city who met the basic criteria. They all had one thing in common. They were highly skilled but professionally stuck with personalities that were introverted, or you could say, by the book. In the end, from dozens of resumes, my mother chose you. Why me? Because on your resume, there was one very unusual detail, Chloe said. For all 4 years of college, you sponsored a child in a poor rural area, paying for their schooling until they graduated elementary. You did this while paying for your own tuition with student loans and part-time jobs. My mom said that a person who is willing to show kindness to a complete stranger, even when he's struggling himself, has a goodness that's baked into his very bones. I was stunned. I had almost forgotten about that. So, the whole year of mooching meals. That was the test. Yes, Chloe admitted, her voice frank. It was a full-spectrum stress test of your character. It was a test to see where the boundaries of your kindness lay when faced with someone who constantly takes. A test to see if you would lash out at others when faced with ridicule and isolation from your colleagues. A test to see if you would abandon your principles when faced with unfair corporate politics and having your work stolen. And a test to see if, when pushed to the brink and publicly humiliated, your spirit would finally break. My every action, the cost of every meal I paid for, my every reaction to Derek's provocations, my every silent acceptance of being shot down in meetings, had been meticulously documented by Chloe in the form of a weekly intern report, complete with pictures and text, and sent to her mother's inbox every Friday. The day Derek stole my proposal, Chloe was at her desk, using a voice recorder to capture him in the stairwell, bragging to his friends about how he had cleverly borrowed my ideas. The night of the gala, when Derek made that humiliating, drunken phone call, she had hit the record button on her own phone. I want to tell you everything the moment you were suspended, Chloe said, her eyes welling up. But my mother said there was one final step. She wanted to see what would happen when a man was trampled into the mud by everyone, stripped of his last shred of dignity. Would he choose to hate the world, or would he still hold onto the light within himself? You stormed into that gala, not to pick a fight, but to demand why. You were berated by your director, misunderstood by everyone, and in the end, you just walked away. My mom listened to my description over the phone, and after a long silence, she said, Chloe took a deep breath, mimicking her mother's authoritative tone. That's him. When a man can be crushed into the mud and still think to look up at the stars instead of cursing the ground, he has the strongest kind of power hidden inside him. Listening to all this, I was overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. All the loneliness, humiliation, and injustice I had endured was, from another perspective, a meticulously designed job interview. What I had perceived as my own foolishness and weakness was, in someone else's eyes, a priceless quality. My kindness, it turned out, hadn't been wasted after all. The dishes arrived one by one, their aromas filling the air. Chloe placed a large, succulent piece of the porterhouse steak onto my plate. Eat Cole, she said with a smile. You've earned this. I picked up the piece of steak and put it in my mouth. The rich, savory flavor exploded on my tongue. The meat was so tender it melted. As I ate, tears began to fall from my eyes without warning, dropping one by one into the plate before me. The headquarters of Voyager Innovations was on the top floor of the tallest skyscraper in the city's bustling financial district. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below, a tapestry of glittering high-rises and ceaseless traffic. It felt like the entire world was at your feet. I walked into my new office, wearing a custom-tailored suit that fit like a second skin. The plaque on the door was engraved with crisp, clear letters. Cole Miller, Vice President, Strategic Development. The first executive meeting was tense. The dozen or so company veterans who had been with Catherine Vance since the beginning sat around the table. Their gazes a mixture of scrutiny, skepticism, and unconcealed hostility. A VP in charge of marketing, a notorious old-timer named Ron Stevens, spoke up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Catherine, this Mr. Miller seems a bit young. I'm curious, what prestigious firm did he come from? What incredible victories does he have under his belt that you'd value him so highly as to parachute him directly into this role? His question voiced what everyone in the room was thinking. All eyes turned to Catherine Vance, awaiting her answer. Catherine Vance, the woman I had only seen in magazines, had an even more powerful presence in person. She wore no makeup, but her eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. Just sitting there calmly, she radiated an aura of unassailable authority. She glanced at Ron Stevens, not answering his question directly. Instead, she asked on her own, "Ron, how many years have you been with me?" 15 years, Catherine. 15 years. Catherine nodded. In 15 years, I took you from a junior salesman to the VP of marketing. As for Mr. Miller here, she turned her gaze to me, her eyes filled with an unshakable trust. I spent 1 year and risked the personal safety and reputation of my only daughter just to bring him on board. Do you really think his value is less than yours? Ron Stevens' face turned a deep, blotchy red. He was speechless. The entire room was silent. Catherine's words carried more weight than any resume ever could. She stood up, officially announced my appointment, and granted me full authority over the company's future strategic expansion. His decisions are my decisions. If anyone has any objections, you can raise them now. If you don't, and I find out you're undermining him later, don't expect me to remember our old ties. No one dared to speak. Catherine looked at me and nodded. Cole, it's all yours. I walked to the head of the table, opened my laptop, and connected it to the projector. The first slide of my PowerPoint displayed a huge, all-too-familiar logo. Project Nova. I began to speak calmly, my voice amplified by the microphone, reaching every corner of the room. Everyone, my first objective in this role is to acquire all subsequent contracts for Project Nova. The room erupted in a low murmur. Project Nova was the darling of the industry, my old company's masterpiece, hailed as a textbook case of success. While Voyager Innovations was a larger company, our core business wasn't a perfect match. To go after it now was like trying to snatch food from a tiger's mouth. Ron Stevens couldn't help himself. Mr. Miller, isn't this a bit reckless? Project Nova is their crown jewel. We don't even have a seat at the table to bid for it. I didn't look at him. My gaze went past the giant window towards a familiar office building in the distance, the headquarters of my old company. I'll get us a seat at the table, I said, my voice cold. Their so-called success is just an illusion built on lies and theft, and my job is to tear that illusion to shreds. After the meeting, Chloe, now assigned as my special assistant, walked into my office with a stack of files. She had traded her casual clothes for a sharp business suit, the last traces of student life gone from her face. Cole, she said, placing the files on my desk. This is all their known deployment data for the next phase, along with the itinerary of the client CEO. He's playing golf next Wednesday. I opened the file, a cold smile touching my lips. The game was just beginning. A week later, the bidding presentation for the second phase of Project Nova's strategic partnership was held in the top-floor conference room of the client's headquarters. When I sat down at the head of Voyager Innovations' bidding table with my team, the atmosphere in the room turned strange. Our sudden entry had caught everyone off guard. My old company's team was the last to arrive. Leading them was the man of the hour, Derek Foster, already internally designated as the next department director, and trailing behind him was the man who had once been my boss, Mark Harris. When they walked into the room and saw me sitting in the center of the opposing delegation, the expressions on their faces were a sight to behold. The smile on Harris's face froze, like a malfunctioning marionette. Derek's jaw nearly hit the floor. He rubbed his eyes hard, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I gave him a slight nod, my smile polite but distant. Derek's face went from red to white, then to a sickly green. He forced himself to sit down, whispering to Harris, "How is this possible? It's a trick. Why would Voyager want him? They're probably just using his name to screw with us." Harris didn't speak. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with shock, anger, and a flicker of undeniable panic. The bidding began. When it was their turn, Derek took a deep breath and walked to the podium. He presented a 2.0 version of the same proposal he had stolen. The core was the same. He had just piled on more flashy, empty concepts. He spoke with passion, as if he were Steve Jobs changing the world. The client's representatives on the panel, however, looked bored. Finally, it was our turn. I didn't go up. I just nodded at Chloe beside me. Chloe stood up, walked to the front, and opened our PowerPoint. There was no lengthy introduction, no flowery language. The screen simply played an animation. The animation simulated the data model from their proposal. It showed how, when the system entered a state of hiking currency traffic in the future, A redundancy in a single, underlying algorithm would cause a catastrophic data chain failure, ultimately crashing the entire system. The animation was terrifyingly realistic. Blue data streams flowed smoothly through digital pipelines, then suddenly began to clog at one node, turning red, before the entire screen flashed with a massive red warning, signifying total system collapse. The room was silent. Derek stood frozen, his face ashen, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. I stood up, picked up the microphone, my voice steady but sharp. Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, this fatal flaw was in fact perfectly solved a year ago in the initial draft of the Project Nova proposal by a by-the-book guy with a less dynamic idea. With every word I spoke, the color drained further from Derek's face. Harris stared at me in disbelief, his lips trembling slightly. I ignored them, addressing the panel and the client's executives. Unfortunately, the subsequent project lead, in an effort to highlight his own innovative ability, or perhaps because he simply didn't understand the brilliance of the original algorithm, erased it with a stroke of his pen, calling it an optimization. Our proposal for Voyager Innovations not only eliminates this flaw at its root, but through a completely new architecture, we can increase the system's overall operational efficiency by at least 30% over its current state. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the deathly pale faces of Derek and Harris. And that is the difference between a professional and an amateur. As my words landed, the client began to applaud. In that moment, I saw it in Derek's eyes, terror, and then a complete and total collapse. I had fought this battle on his turf, in the arena he was most proud of, and I had professionally, systematically, and utterly destroyed him. It was more satisfying than 100 slaps to the face. The result of the bid was a foregone conclusion. Voyager Innovations won the entire 5-year contract for Project Nova by an overwhelming margin. When the news broke, my old company's stock plummeted, losing nearly $1 billion in market value in a single day. But that was just the beginning. The day after the bid, I invited my old company's lead engineer, Frank Peterson, to dinner. Frank was in his 50s, one of the few people from my past that I genuinely respected. He was a brilliant technician and an honest man, but he wasn't a smooth talker or a political player, so he was always marginalized and underappreciated. After Derek took over, he made Frank's life hell, dumping all the impossible tasks and scapegoat projects on him. I met him at a quiet tea house. I didn't waste time with small talk. I got straight to my offer. Frank, come to Voyager. The position of Chief Technology Officer is yours. The salary is triple what you're making now, plus founder's level stock options. Frank's hand, holding his teacup, trembled slightly. He looked at me, a complex emotion flickering in his tired eyes. Cole, he said with a sigh. No, I should call you Mr. Miller now. I always knew you were destined for bigger things. I just didn't expect it to happen this fast. He set down his cup. To be honest, with a hack like Derek in charge, a guy who got there by scheming, the morale of the team is shot. Nobody wants to work anymore. But we've all got families and mortgages, so we're afraid to make a move. I need you, and I need your team, I said, looking at him with sincerity. At Voyager, I promise you, all you'll have to do is focus on the tech. I'll handle everything else. Frank was silent for a long time. Then he gave a firm, decisive nod. Okay, I'm with you. Within a week, Voyager Innovations sent formal offers to over half of the core engineering team at my old company, starting with Frank, and every single one of them signed. These were the people who were the bedrock of Project Nova. With them gone, Derek's newly won project instantly became an empty shell, an engine with no parts. The entire company was thrown into chaos and panic. Mark Harris called me, absolutely furious. The moment I answered, he started screaming. Cole, what the hell do you think you're doing? You should know better than to burn your bridges. Do you have to be so damn ruthless? I held the phone away from my ear until he was done shouting, then brought it back and asked in a perfectly calm voice, Director Harris, back at that gala, when you suspended me in front of everyone, did you ever think this day would come? The other end of the line went silent. I didn't give him another chance to speak. I just hung up. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, looking out at the glittering city lights. I didn't feel much of anything, just the cold satisfaction of revenge and the first taste of what real power felt like. Chloe walked in with a cup of coffee. Cole, it's done. It's a total meltdown over at DataCorp. I took the coffee and had a sip. It was bitter, but it was clarifying. It's called pulling the rug out from under them, I said. When you're dealing with predators, you can't show an ounce of mercy, because when you're kind to them, they only see it as weakness. The CEO of DataCorp was finally roused to action. Enraged, he ordered a special internal investigation to find the root cause of the Project Nova failure and a mass exodus of the engineering team. Derek was the primary target. Pushed into a corner, he did what he did best. He started throwing people under the bus. He tried to bribe his former subordinates, to falsify meeting minutes and work emails, all to prove that the problem had existed long before, that he had identified the risks, but was blocked by the engineering team, the very people I had just hired. He even tried to shift the ultimate blame onto me, the guy he'd already forced out, claiming the foundation of the proposal I'd left behind was flawed, and he was just cleaning up my mess. He was a master at this game of lies and betrayal. Unfortunately for him, he was no longer dealing with the defenseless Cole Miller. Chloe handed me an encrypted flash drive. "Cole, it's time to use this." On the drive were 2 audio files. The first was the recording of him in the stairwell, bragging to his friends about how he had brilliantly stolen my proposal. That idiot Cole pulled 2 weeks of all-nighters to write that thing. It took me 1 evening to make it mine. Ha ha, you think he's pissed? What can I say? The bosses love my style. It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. A workhorse like him deserves to get ridden into the ground. The second was the recording of his humiliating phone call from the gala. Every single word was crystal clear. I had Voyager's IT department send both audio files from an untraceable, anonymous email address to the CEO of DataCorp, every member of the board of directors, and the head of their internal compliance department. The next day, I was reviewing a new project proposal when Chloe hurried in, holding a tablet. "Cole, they released the memo." I took the tablet. Displayed on the screen was an internal disciplinary notice from DataCorp. Disciplinary action concerning former strategic department employee Derek Foster following an internal investigation. It has been determined that employee Derek Foster engaged in severe academic misconduct and violated professional ethics during the Project Nova initiative. He has been found guilty of plagiarizing a colleague's work and deceiving management, causing immeasurable reputational and financial damage to the company. By resolution of the executive board, Derek Foster is terminated, effective immediately. The company reserves the right to pursue legal action to recover all associated project losses. Black and white. Ironclad proof. He was nailed to the cross of his own making. I heard that on the day he was fired, HR personnel supervised him as he packed his desk in front of the entire department, confiscating his ID badge and laptop. He left with a gray, defeated face, like a stray dog with a broken back. He looked 100 times more pathetic than I had when I packed my things. The same colleagues who had once orbited him, calling him D-Man and laughing along as they mocked me, now avoided him like the plague. And when they spoke about me now, their tone had completely changed. I can't believe it. Cole was the real wolf in sheep's clothing. Never mess with the quiet ones. When they finally snap, it's game over. Serve 'em right. Guys like Derek deserve everything they get. I listened to Chloe relay these comments with a calm heart. I didn't need their fear, nor did I care for their chatter. I had simply taken back what was mine, and in the process, ensured a villain got his just desserts. Nothing more, nothing less. Mark Harris didn't fare much better. As Derek's direct supervisor and champion, he was held responsible for the hiring blunder and the catastrophic project loss. He was stripped of his director title, demoted to a rank-and-file employee, and reassigned to manage the company's windowless archives. In effect, he was put out of pasture, left to quit on his own terms. He didn't quit. One Friday evening, I saw a familiar, yet strangely diminished figure in the underground parking garage of the Voyager building. It was Mark Harris. He was leaning against a concrete pillar. When he saw me, he quickly stubbed out his cigarette and scurried over. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a matter of days. His once slicked hair was now mostly gray and plastered messily to his scalp. His sharp suit was replaced with a wrinkled jacket. His back was stooped. The arrogant swagger was gone. "Cole." "No, Mr. Miller." He pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket and offered one to me, forcing a smile that was more painful than a grimace. "Mr. Miller, have a smoke." I waved my hand, declining. "Mr. Miller, back then it was my fault. I was blind. I was fooled by that snake Derek." He humbled himself completely, his back bent at nearly a 90-degree angle. "You're a bigger man than that. Please, don't hold a grudge against a blind old fool like me." He started lamenting his difficult life, talking about his aging parents and young children, and how he couldn't afford to lose this job. I watched him, my face a cold, silent mask. Seeing my indifference, he gritted his teeth, leaned in closer, and lowered his voice, hissing like a serpent. "Mr. Miller, I know our company is pursuing a major deal in South Africa. I can get you all the core data on that deal. I can even give you our last remaining major client list. Just give me a position at Voyager. Anything. I'll be a security guard. I don't care." To save his own skin, He was ready to sell out his company without a moment's hesitation. I looked at his ugly, groveling face and suddenly remembered him at the gala, pointing his finger at me and screaming. I remembered him in the meeting, casually dismissing my work before praising Derek. If our positions were reversed today, would he offer me a hand? The answer was obvious. I suddenly laughed. "Director Harris," I said, looking at him calmly, my words slow and deliberate. "I have a very good memory. I remember you telling me that a by-the-book guy like me had ideas that weren't dynamic enough. Looking at you now, it seems your ideas are far more dynamic than mine." I didn't wait to see the color drain from his face. I turned, opened my car door, and got in. As the car pulled out of the garage, I saw him in the rearview mirror, still frozen in place like a statue of despair, his shadow stretching long and pathetic under the dim lights. I would not help him, because I would never, ever become a person like him. My kindness now had an edge. My principles were no longer negotiable. That was the most valuable lesson I had learned from a year of pain and humiliation. After the storm passed, my life and work finally settled into a new rhythm. I led the engineering team I'd poached from DataCorp, merged them with Voyager's existing marketing department, and we completely rebuilt Project Nova from the ground up. The project was a spectacular success, and Voyager Innovation's stock price soared. I was beginning to truly enjoy the feeling of being in control, of steering the ship. But Chloe didn't seem happy. She was no longer the bubbly girl who followed me around, chattering about what to eat for lunch or what boba tea to get in the afternoon. She grew quiet. Often, I'd return to the office after a meeting and find her sitting at her desk, just staring out the window. She was like a secret agent whose mission was complete. Now that the dust had settled, she had lost her sense of direction, her purpose. She felt like a pawn, a tool perfectly deployed by her mother. One day, I finished my work early and walked over to her desk. "Come on, I'm taking you somewhere." I didn't take her to a fancy restaurant. Instead, I drove us back to the food street next to our old office building. I led her into the same little hole-in-the-wall diner we had frequented the most. The owner, a cheerful middle-aged man, still remembered me. "Hey, Cole, long time no see." When he saw Chloe behind me, his smile grew even wider. "And you brought your little sister for a meal. It's been too long." I smiled and ordered a blackened catfish and a bowl of gumbo, our old favorites. When the food came, I took the lead for the first time, placing a large piece of fish on her plate. "Back then, you were there for me," I said, looking at her seriously. "Now, it's my turn to be here for you." She froze, looking up at me, her eyes filled with a kind of dazed confusion. I told her the reason I had managed to survive that dark, thankless year wasn't just because of some bullshit inner strength. It was because every single day, I had a lunch buddy waiting for me, without fail. She made me feel like I wasn't alone. She allowed me to feel a sliver of pure, unadulterated warmth in the face of a hostile world. "You weren't a tool, Chloe," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "You were my first and only friend at that company. You walked with me through the darkest chapter of my life. Now, I want to invite you to walk with me toward a brighter future." I pulled another contract out of my jacket pocket. "Voyager Innovations. Chief Operating Officer. Stop being your mom's assistant and her spy. Be my second in command. My partner. Together, we'll make Voyager bigger and stronger than ever. This isn't your mother's arrangement, and it's not me repaying a debt. This is me, Cole Miller, giving you a formal invitation. This is your choice." Chloe looked at the contract, and her eyes slowly turned red. Tears, like pearls from a broken string, rolled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She just cried, and then she smiled. She nodded vigorously, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay." She paused, sniffled, and that familiar, mischievous grin returned to her face. "But just so we're clear, you're still buying the afternoon coffee." We looked at each other and laughed. It felt like we were back where we started, but we both knew that everything had changed. We were no longer the giver and the taker. We were partners, fighting side by side. We were two lonely souls who had saved each other and were finally starting a new life together. 1 year later, under the joint leadership of myself and Chloe, the market value of Voyager Innovations had tripled. We had successfully surpassed all our old rivals to become the undisputed new leader in the industry. At this year's industry summit, I was invited on stage as the business person of the year to give the keynote address. In the audience, sitting front row and center, were Catherine Vance and Chloe. Catherine's face was a portrait of undisguised pride and admiration. Chloe's eyes were shining like stars. Not far from them, I also saw a familiar face, the new CEO of my old company. His expression was a complex mix of envy, jealousy, and a touch of regret. I stood in the spotlight, facing over 1,000 business elites, and shared the story of Voyager's success over the past year. The theme of my speech was the power of principled business. I didn't talk much about complex business models or capital strategies. I talked about people. At Voyager, we don't invest in polished resumes. We invest in the light of human character. We believe that a person's integrity, far more than their skill, determines the heights they can reach. At the end of my speech, I invited Chloe onto the stage with me. In front of the entire assembly of business leaders and media reporters, facing a sea of flashing cameras, I smiled and said, "You probably won't believe this, but the reason I, Cole Miller, am standing here today isn't because of some extraordinary talent or some privileged background. It's simply because 2 years ago, I bought this woman lunch for an entire year." The audience was stunned for a moment, then erupted into warm, genuine laughter and applause. I looked at Chloe beside me, and she looked back at me, our eyes sharing a secret understanding and affection. Every one of those meals was a test of my character and an investment in my future. And Voyager's success today is proof that it was the riskiest and most successful venture investment in the world. Chloe and I stood side by side in the spotlight. On the massive screen behind us, a photograph slowly faded into view. It was one I had secretly taken with my phone from the very first time we ate at that little diner. In the photo, she was completely absorbed in her food, a grain of rice stuck to the corner of her mouth. In the photo, I was looking at her, and in my eyes was a tenderness that even I hadn't recognized at the time. A debt of a meal, repaid with a wellspring of loyalty. This wasn't just a story of revenge. It was a story about kindness, resilience, and two lonely souls who healed each other, and in the end, found a new beginning together.